Hello and thank you for being here today. Bonjour et merci d'être ici aujourd'hui. Je tiens tout d'abord à souligner que nous sommes réunis à Ottawa sur le territoire non cédé du peuple algonquin, Anishinaabe. We are here today to present the results of the security reclassification and transfer of federal inmate Paul Bernardo. For the remainder of this press conference, I will refer to him as this inmate, out of respect for the victims. The news that this inmate had been transferred from a maximum to a medium security institution upset many Canadians. And I know that many are looking for answers. My thoughts are with the victims and their families. We contacted all of the registered victims prior to this announcement, and I spoke directly to those wishing to discuss the findings of the review. What they have gone through is unimaginable. Public safety and their safety continues to be top of mind for us in any decisions we make. Hearing about this case so intensely over the past several weeks has brought up strong emotions, and rightly so. I regret any pain and concern this transfer has caused. There is no doubt that this inmate committed horrific and unspeakable crimes, crimes that continue to have an immeasurable impact on the victims and their families. We want justice to be served. And in the case of this inmate, he was given the harshest sentence possible in our Canadian criminal justice system. I can assure you that we are doing our job by keeping him securely behind bars in a federal penitentiary, and have been for close to 30 years and counting. In Canada, our correctional system is fundamentally based on the rehabilitation of offenders, even if some remain incarcerated for the rest of their lives. This is our legislated mandate. Everything we do and all decisions we take are guided by the law, and we want Canadians to have confidence in our decisions. La sécurité du public est le critère prépondérant dans la prise de toutes nos décisions. En outre, l'un des principes directeurs de la loi consiste à prendre les mesures les moins privatives de liberté. Pour appliquer ce principe, nous tenons compte de nombreux facteurs, dont le risque pour la sécurité du personnel et du public, les droits des victimes, ainsi que le traitement sûr, sécuritaire et humain. Et on se doit de trouver l'équilibre parfait. En ce qui concerne la décision de transférer ce détenu vers un établissement à sécurité moyenne, j'ai entendu plusieurs points de vue. C'est pourquoi j'ai estimé qu'il était important d'ordonner la tenue d'un examen additionnel pour garantir l'exactitude de notre décision. J'ai donc ordonné la mise sur pied d'un comité d'examen composé de 3 personnes, dont des représentants externes. Ce comité a eu pour mandat de vérifier si les décisions visant la réévaluation de la cote de sécurité et le transfèrement de ce détenu étaient conformes à la loi, aux politiques et aux procédures qui guident notre travail et qu'elles tenaient dûment compte des victimes. Je tiens à remercier les membres du comité d'examen de leur travail, de leurs recommandations et de leur rapidité d'exécution. The review committee concluded that the decisions to reclassify this inmate to medium security and transfer him to La Macasa Institution were sound and followed all applicable laws and policies. It also concluded that we followed applicable laws and policies regarding victim notification. As you know, we usually do not divulge personal information as it is protected by law. The public interest test is a high bar. and we need to weigh a number of factors before making the decision to use this clause. In this exceptional circumstance, I have authorized the release of some personal information about this inmate, as I believe it is in the public interest to have a better understanding of the reasons why this specific decision was made. So under the law, CSC must assign a security classification to each inmate and review it at regular intervals. This is a very rigorous process. There's two aspects to assessing the security classification of an inmate: a statistical component using objective, research-based actuarial tools, and a clinical component based on the appraisal of a set of factors. On the actuarial tool, this inmate received a score corresponding to a medium security classification rating. The legislation identified 3 areas that also need to be assessed. These areas are first, the institutional adjustment. In other words, the degree of supervision and control required within the institution to manage the inmate. Second, the escape risk. And third, the risk to the public in the event of an escape. On the 3 areas identified in the regulations, this inmate was assessed as moderate on institutional adjustment, moderate on escape risk, and high on the risk to the safety of the public. The final risk assessment, which combined the actuarial score and the assessment of the 3 areas, determined that his security classification was medium. I want to be clear here that despite being a medium security inmate, he is still assessed as a high risk to the safety of the public, even after close to 30 years of incarceration. He also continues to hold a dangerous offender designation, which was imposed by the court. No inmate who is a high risk to the public can go to a minimum security institution. Once a security classification has been determined, inmates must be placed in an institution that corresponds to their security level. When deciding on which institution is most suitable for the management of the inmate, the law requires that CSC take into account a number of factors, including the availability of appropriate programs and services. Lama Casa is a medium security institution that is compatible with this inmate's profile. The institution offers programming for sex offenders, and staff there specialize in managing this type of offender. Lama Casa institution has similar perimeter control as a maximum security institution, including high fences and armed patrols. It is important to stress that at any point, an inmate can be returned to a higher security level if deemed necessary to ensure the safety of staff, our institutions, and the public. On the issue of victim notification and engagement, the review committee concluded that CSC could have had more proactive and meaningful discussions with victims in a manner that still complied with the Privacy Act. It recommended that I establish a multidisciplinary working committee to enhance policies and practices pertaining to victims. I accept this recommendation. Le service est déterminé à respecter les droits des victimes et je mettrai sur pied un comité de travail qui sera chargé d'examiner la façon dont nous communiquons avec les victimes et aussi la façon dont nous pouvons améliorer nos services à leur égard. Nous allons tenir compte des suggestions du comité et allons travailler en collaboration avec l'Ombudsman fédéral des victimes d'actes criminels. While I recognize that this case has opened up a larger debate about the role of corrections in our society, it is important for us to keep in mind the larger context. I have been with CSC for close to 40 years, and I know that our feelings towards offenders cannot guide our decisions. Our system only works if we continue to carry out our duties according to the rule of law. In closing, I want to thank our employees who work tirelessly with federal offenders towards this goal. Merci à tous nos employés qui travaillent sans relâche. I know and I trust that they will continue to make sound assessments and decisions to ensure the safety of the public and our institutions based on their expertise and the rule of law. Thank you. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. On va procéder avec la période de questions. Would you like to start, Rachel? Rachel Haynes, CTV.
Thank you for talking today. My name is Rachel. I'm from CHCH. I want to talk a little bit more about the integration level that will be receiving at Lama Plaza. That is one of the concerns that the recruiter had about why he was able to after a couple of months of reintegration at Millhaven. Can you tell us a little bit more about what kind of integration this inmate will see at Millhaven institution? What kind of freedom will he have within
Okay. Yes. So, as you know, the inmate has been incarcerated for close to 30 years. You also know that the inmate was incarcerated at Kingston Pen until it closed in 2013. And then the inmate was transferred to Millhaven institutions. When he first arrived at Millhaven, he was isolated, and slowly, over a number of years, he started being integrated with, it started with a couple of inmates, and then the group got slightly larger, and it was constantly monitored. And then in the summer of 2022, that's when he more fully integrated his range. So it was a long-term strategy of integration. So I know in the report it talks about July 2022, but that's when he fully integrated. But you will also see in the report that it talks that it was the part of a larger integrated approach that was used in this case.
And one of the main concerns that is expressed by the recruiter was that it seems that it was just this period of 4 months. Up until then, every year or every 2 years that he'd had this review, that the system, your actual ministerial rule, was overridden and said, you know, he can't be moved. He doesn't have the right institutional profile for this. But then all of a sudden, it seems, okay, well, now in a period of 4 months after decades in prison, he was able to integrate. And I know you say it was a slow integration. My understanding of the report is it doesn't seem to be that slow as much of that was more of the rationale that was used. Can you explain to Canadians a little bit more about how this inmate, after 20 years of his profiles remaining the same, in just 4 months, all of a sudden, you know, it's acceptable for him to be classified?
Yes, first of all, I'd like to say to Canadians, it wasn't just 4 months. Again, it was part of a larger strategy. So what happens when we do security classification? I explained that we look at institutional adjustment, and that's the degree of supervision and control that's required to manage an inmate in an institution. So in the case of this particular inmate, the fact that he was integrated with 1 or 2 other offenders still meant that it required a fairly high degree of supervision and control, because we had to monitor how the integration was going. And so over time, though, when he started fully integrating his range, and there were no incidents, and that was noted in the report, then it was felt that on institutional adjustment, he now required a moderate degree of supervision and control. And that's what institutional adjustment means. It means that The other thing I will say, in maximum security, over 95% of the inmates that are there because they cannot be managed in another institution. It means that they assault one another or they are very assaultive against staff. So until their behavior stabilizes, we need to keep them in maximum security. Once their behavior stabilizes, we normally move them to medium. The other thing that I said in my opening remarks, which is very important, a security classification exists. Okay, it's medium. But there are instances where overnight there's an incident that will occur in an institution, and that has happened actually this week, where a number of offenders were at medium and suddenly found themselves in a maximum security institution. Because in CSC, that's our business, the risk assessment, and we constantly observe and monitor the inmates. And if there's a significant event that requires that we move them, we will not hesitate to do so. So I hope this answers your question.
We move to Alex Bellingal, Toronto Star.
Thank you very much. It seems like there is a principle at work here that the rehabilitation of this inmate is possible, or that the system around him is predicated on that idea that inmates can improve and change, and that they can go to different security classifications because of that. Whereas I think a lot of the public outrage over this has been of the thirst for punishing somebody who's done such heinous crimes. I wonder what you think of that, and if you can talk about why that principle of change is possible exists in the correction system, even for people like this.
So, well, first of all, for us, and this is really more generally because today it's about the results of the review of this particular case. For more generally, our mandate is to rehabilitate inmates, offenders. And the reason for that is they come to us, and there's a large majority, not everybody, as I said in my opening remarks, some stay with us for the rest of their lives, but there's a vast majority that are going to return to our communities. And for us, it is extremely important that we provide them with the programming and interventions that are necessary. And so that when they are released, they are better people than when they came to us. And all of us here, every single person that works in CSC, we are members of the community. And paramount for us is protection of society. I know there's been a debate, though, as far as whether or not psychopaths can benefit from programming. But for us in an institution to manage offenders, we want them to be productively occupied. So if inmates require education, we want them to go to school. If they require programming, we want them to go to programming. If they require interventions, we want them to actually participate in those interventions. Even if they may not never go to a minimum security institution, and even if they may never set foot in the community, because it helps us manage them while they are in the institution.
What do you say to people who would look at this inmate, as you call him, look at his crime and say, that's not good enough, we want to see him suffer in what he did?
So the punishment is the sentence. And he was given the harshest sentence possible in the Canadian criminal justice system. And I can speak the difference between Millhaven and Lama Casa. And I've been to both. He's in a cell. It has the same perimeter controls, high fences, armed patrols. In both institutions, inmates have access to visitors, because I think there's a misconception that in maximum security institution, inmates can have visitors. In at all security levels, they have access to education programs and interventions. I know there's even a question that was asked: do they have different foods depending on the security level where they're at? No, the menu is the same whether you are at maximum, medium, or minimum.
Next up, David Aiken, Global News.
Good afternoon, David Aiken, Global News. Your minister may lose his job, or you may have a new minister overseeing CSC, partly as a result of the way the communications were handled in this. And as you know, the minister says he did not learn of this transfer until I think after it happened. I think the prime minister said he knew of it ahead of time. You feel you have failed your minister, or that you might bear some responsibility for the fact there's going to have to be some changes to the cabinet here.
So for us, we followed a long-standing process that we've been using to notify the minister's office of high-profile transfers. We also advise the minister's office of deaths in custody, of escapes, as you know. In this case, the minister has made it clear, and I think you've seen the ministerial directive that moving forward, he wants to be formally and directly advised, and this is what I'm going to do moving forward.
I want to talk a little bit about Bernardo. I haven't had the benefit of reading all 85 pages. We just got it at 1 o'clock. But if I get me wrong, he initiates the review of his status in 2022 and asked to go to Bath, and the review results in being denied, and that Bath is not a suitable institution. And then some months later, he again initiates the review. It wasn't CSC initiating the review. And this time he says he identifies Lama Casa as the institution you should go to. Seems to be more appropriate as you spelled it out. So I just want to sort of walk through that. The report also talks about potential threats to his safety during his time at Millhaven, that he was a high-profile offender because of the nature of his crimes. He may have been at risk of being assaulted. So can I just get you to talk about the inmate's time in custody of CSC? Was he assaultive? What was his general behavior? Was he at risk of a assault from other inmates? And did that risk to his safety play into the decision to move him to Lama Casa and to deny him going to Bath? I realize there's a lot in there. I'm just trying to get a sense of this is a unique offender that
Yes.
other inmates may wish to have caused him harm.
Yes.
I wonder if you could talk about that.
So what I can say is when this particular offender arrived in the federal system, when he was at first at KP, and then when he transferred to Millhaven, again, he required a high degree of supervision and control because his safety was at risk. So in terms of him being the instigator of incidents, I think you will see in the report that was not the case. So in terms of his integration at Millhaven, this is where the kind of the long-term approach started, where he was able to integrate slowly with a couple of offenders, and over time, it became a larger group. As I said, once the security classification is determined, then we have to look at what's the most viable option in terms of an institution. There were no viable options in the Ontario region. So Bath was not seen as a viable option for this particular inmate. Lama Casa was. Lama Casa has programming for sex offenders, and the staff there actually specialize in managing this type of population. And so because, again, he was able to integrate with a much larger group, his institutional adjustment. That's the reason that it was reduced to moderate instead of high. However, he remains a high risk to the safety of the public.
Kirsty Kirkup, go ahead.
Hi, Commissioner. I know you've already acknowledged essentially what happened with the Minister of Public Safety, but I'm wondering on a personal level if you have a do-over moment. You had many face-to-face meetings, we understand, with the Minister in the lead up to what happened, the decision that was taken. Would you have done anything differently in terms of your personal communication with the Minister of Public Safety so that he was directly made aware of what was happening to be such a notorious
So I had meeting with the ministers, but typically we do not discuss operational decisions such as security classification and transfers. And again, we've had a long-standing process. However, moving forward, it's clear that I'm going to formally and directly advise the minister.
wanted to ask, did it cross your mind though? I know we're talking about the individual here, but probably Canada's most notorious killer. And I hear your point that it was not typical to talk about operations, but it didn't cross your mind that the name Paul Bernardo might rise to the level of being at the top of the for the minister. That wasn't something at that time that he thought might be something he needed.
Well, again, certainly in terms of CSC, what we did is we realized it would receive media attention. And it's clear it elicited very strong emotions uh, for the victims, for the families, for Canadians in general. But certainly my team here ensured that the minister's office was briefed, and I had assurances that they had been briefed. I cannot speak to what was put in front of the minister, but moving forward, again, the minister, I will formally and directly advise the minister.
Apologies, I think I cut your second question, David.
Sorry, I just had a quick third follow-up, and this is just on behalf of some of my colleagues. It's access to information work. Received an email that Assistant Commissioner Gagnon received. So I don't know if who wants to comment on this, Commissioner Kelly, Assistant Commissioner Gagnon, but this is a May 25th email. So this is 4 days before the release. You may remember this, in which Assistant Commissioner Gagnon is sort of circulating some potential media lines. But at the top of this email, Assistant Commissioner Gagnon, you talked about this needs to be kept, quote, low profile, need to know, and close hold. I just wonder, could you put a little color on what you're trying to tell your colleagues? Of course, some of it's blacked out. We don't know exactly who this was to, like the recipient list, but could you just give us a little color on that, perhaps? I don't know if you
Sure.
remember this particular email.
I absolutely do.
Okay.
Yeah. Happy to offer a comment. So it's all about safety. Like we keep these strategies for communication of transfers and the high profile ones fairly close hold. And it's around the information that we're circulating about an offender, but also about the safety planning for the victims involved. It's very difficult if news gets out about an offender, as you can imagine, for the victims when they don't have a chance to be briefed and prepare for it. And I know that even being here today and hearing about this case again is quite difficult for them. And secondly, it's about the operation safety. So for our staff that have to conduct the operation, we want to make sure that they're going to be protected as well. And everybody knew it was a matter of public record that the offender was at Millhaven. So that's what I would say.
Ashley Burke, CTV, CBC.
The federal ombudsman for victims of crime says that their office has been calling for 15 years since they opened the office, on your office to have victims be part of the discussion before a high-profile offense, including to medium security facilities. Does this ministerial directive address that? So specifically, victims' families or registered victims can have a say and be part of the discussion and know ahead of time before that decision is even made.
Actually, the ministerial directive does that. So it's really about the importance, and we have done that, is the importance of the victims understanding that they can submit a victim statement at any time. And I think that sometimes what happens is this is something that may be said to them early on, but we want to ensure that, again, we communicate to victims that at any point you can submit a victim statement that's going to be considered. The other thing is you also saw that the review committee made a recommendation that I establish a committee um, to improve our services to victim. And in the review committee, in the report, what you will see is, and having spoken to the victims, they were really appreciative of the information. But for me, it reminded me of the importance of people understanding the rigorous processes that we go through to arrive at the decisions we make. So that's one thing. And again, we will collaborate with victims. We will collaborate with the federal ombudsman to see how we can improve services. The other thing that we share with victims, if they request it, is what we call a correctional plan progress report. And it has a bit of information about the offender. It has his criminogenic kind of risk factors. It has the progress he has made, and that's something we share with the victim. And in that progress report, we also have kind of significant events that are going to occur. So in this case, it was the fact that he's going to have a parole hearing. But we are going to look at this CPR, sorry, this is the acronym, to see if there's more information that we can include, such as upcoming transfers. So this is work that we are going to do moving forward.
You said that you spoke to him or met with him on a weekly or every 2 weeks in the months leading up to the transfer. You've mentioned why you didn't bring it up, but how come that didn't, like, why didn't that come up? And as well, is it appropriate that he didn't know until after the
Well, again, the meetings that I've had would have been on policy issues. Oftentimes, it's what we call, it's a meeting where all portfolio agencies are, and I may not necessarily have something on the agenda to discuss. And again, I will say that we do not typically talk about operational decisions such as security classification and transfers. But moving forward, I will formally and directly advise the minister. What we call, it's a meeting where all portfolio agencies are, and I may not necessarily have something. We followed a long-standing process, and I can't comment on the minister's office. I think the minister, though, has been clear that he's taken steps.
Stephanie Taylor?
Hi, Commissioner. Thanks for being here. You yourself just said it's important that Canadians understand the rigorous processes CSC follows. But why didn't you provide this level of transparency, a press conference, the reasons behind the inmate's transfer at the time it happened or even before? And in retrospect, given all the questions, given how emotional this has been, should you have?
So on this, right, and I brought them, but right after it happened, on June 5th, I issued actually a statement. And in the statement, I said I had ordered an additional review. I talked about a little bit about Paul Bernardo. I talked about the same perimeter controls in both institutions. I talked about the fact that we review the security classification every 2 years. I also talked about what we assess, so institutional adjustment, escape risk, and risk to the safety of the public. And then later on in June, there were a lot of questions that were being asked. So we elaborated even further in in basically sharing information about who is in maximum security, for what reasons. Um, and the reason that we didn't do a press conference like this is that on June 5th, I ordered the additional review. On June 9th, we had struck the committee. On June 12th, the committee started their work. On June 26th, they submitted their report. Then we had the report translated. We had the report redacted. One of the recommendations in the report was that I share the results of the review with the victims first, which is something I did. And we also had to coordinate with the privacy commissioner because we invoked 82M to be able to release in this exceptional circumstance more personal information about the inmate. And this led us to today where I'm sharing the results of the review with.
With respect, you said, after 40 years of being at CSC, and you won't say the inmate's name, given the extent of pain he caused to this country and to individual victims, why wouldn't you think to be more transparent about this and maybe release some of the information behind his transfer before? Don't you think, or do you think that might have taken down some of the temperature and some of the debate we've seen in this country?
We released information as soon as it broke out in the media. We did release some information. What I will say though, and the reason I'm not actually mentioning the names of the victims, that's out of respect for the victims, because I spoke to the victims. So I just want to say that. That's the reason I'm not mentioning the name. But the one thing though, having spoken to the victims, and there's a recommendation in the report, I think that we have more to do in terms of sharing with the public, not when there's a crisis, but sharing with the public the important work that we do in protecting society. So, and our job is challenging, it's complex. We have very, very rigorous processes. And I think that moving forward, we are going to try to find ways to speak about the work that we do so that Canadians in general, when they hear of a decision, will have a better idea how we arrived at that decision.
Je vois une question seulement sur Zoom. Je sais que le temps passe, donc si Madame la commissaire, vous acceptez
Oui.
d'étendre votre courtoisie à une question
Oui.
de plus, et j'en aurais une aussi en tant que modérateur avant d'y aller, celle-là. Euh, Boris Proulx du Devoir, il y a quelque chose de vraiment pas clair. Si un ministre veut renverser votre décision à la commission, comment il fait?
Ben, le ministre ne peut pas renverser la décision. La décision appartient au Service correctionnel du Canada. Puis la revue, justement, voulait, le mandat du comité était de voir si le service avait agi dans le cadre de la loi et des politiques. Et puis le comité a conclu que c'était le cas.
Madame la commissaire, vous avez eu des questions de journalistes qui demandaient ce que le ministre savait, tout ça. Quel est le rapport si le ministre ne peut rien changer à la situation? Quel est le rapport des débats sur ce que le ministre savait ou pas, selon vous? Pourquoi maintenant en tenir informé le ministre s'il ne peut pas changer votre décision?
Mais je pense que le débat était plus au niveau des avis qui avaient été ou pas donnés au bureau du ministre. Je pense que le débat était plus centré sur ça. Après ça, comme je dis, moi, j'ai ordonné une revue, puis c'était une revue additionnelle parce qu'on en avait déjà fait une à l'interne pour voir si on avait agi, comme je dis, dans le cadre de la loi et des politiques.
Donc, vous pensez que c'est clair que le politique ne peut pas du tout influencer vos décisions? J'ai bien compris ça?
Je pense que oui.
On va passer sur Zoom, s'il vous plaît, à Marie-Josée Paquette-Comeau de Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, est-ce que vous m'entendez bien?
Oui.
Je vous entends,
Oui,
Marie-Josée.
parfait, merci beaucoup. Je rebondis sur la question de mon collègue. Si vous considérez que le ministre ne peut pas renverser aucune des décisions, pourquoi souscrire en fait à sa demande de l'informer et est-ce que ce n'est qu'un exercice de communication?
Non, si c'est clair que quand moi j'ai été informée que la cote de sécurité avait été identifiée comme étant moyenne, moi j'ai demandé justement que mon équipe des opérations, donc l'équipe de France, regarde le cas pour s'assurer que ça suivait, c'était dans le cadre des lois et des politiques. Et c'était le cas, la revue interne a conclu que ce l'était. C'est clair que si le comité d'examen nous avait dit, écoutez, vous avez pas suivi le cadre de la loi et des politiques, là, il faudrait naturellement agir.
Puis, j'ai une autre question. En fait, si c'est possible de répondre en français à une question d'une collègue un peu plus tôt, vous disiez reconnaître qu'il y avait une défaillance au niveau de la communication auprès de la population. Donc, qu'est-ce que vous allez mettre en place là, pour s'assurer que la population canadienne comprenne vos décisions, accepte vos décisions en amont, avant les transferts des détenus?
Ben, c'est clair, ça, c'est des discussions que j'ai avec le secteur des communications. Euh, on veut justement que les Canadiens et Canadiennes comprennent les processus euh, par lesquels on rend nos décisions. C'est des processus complexes. Nos processus sont robustes. On a des idées justement sur comment peut-être on pourrait rejoindre une plus grande partie de la population pour partager le travail important que nous font.
Et est-ce que
Je
la
vois.
population pourrait vous faire changer d'idée devant l'indignation? Est-ce que c'est une possibilité?
De faire changer d'idée sur ce cas-là.
Sur autre cas en général, est-ce que vous considérez l'indignation de la population face à vos idées pour des réévaluations?
Nous autres, on agit dans le cadre de la loi et des politiques.
Je ne
Parfait,
vois plus de
merci
questions
beaucoup.
sur Je ne vois plus de questions sur Zoom. David, you had a very last follow-up and then we put an end to this.
It's extraordinary. And I just had the chance, getting the chance to go through this. So you included in the package the letter from the Council of the Families.
Yes.
And this kind of goes to what my friend Alex was saying, but I just want to read back what he asked the committee, the review committee. While principles of rehabilitation are critical and apply to 99% of the federal prison population, they do not to the remaining 1%, like Paul Bernardo, who are beyond rehabilitation. The system can neither pretend nor play games. And he wanted to know why you didn't wait the sentencing from Justice Lesage, why you didn't wait the findings of 3 parole boards, 18, 20, and 22, that this guy is still a psychopath. Why there isn't that? Yes, you followed the rules and it's all, we did this assess, but you didn't remember that it's the inmate Paul Bernardo, the most evil person that I've known in my lifetime. You may as well. That there needs to be some exception to say, no, don't even ask again. You see and that's the outrage I'm reading in the letter from the Council of the Family. I think some Canadians look at that. Why wasn't there some outrage on the behalf of the human beings who run CSE to say, we are not going to move you?
So in CSC, we have compassion for the victims. I started as a parole officer. France has been a parole officer. Paul Bernardo has committed horrific and unspeakable crimes. Both France and I have read files where others have committed horrific and unspeakable crimes. The thing is that in CSC, our job is to manage the inmate. And where can we manage this inmate? Decisions in terms of his release to the community are not made by CSC. They're made by the Parole Board of Canada. Despite the fact that he is at a medium security institution, does not negate the fact that he is a psychopath and that he committed horrific and unspeakable crimes. So
I see no further questions. Madame la oh, Rachel, c'est-
Very quick though. It's just I wanted to is it seems that they were only notified about the transfer, but why are victims not notified of the security class? Because the transfer was for like for many months before it actually happened. It's transfer the class. So why are you waiting until the actual transfer date to tell victims and not let them know in the classification? As you said to Ashley, they can, submit letters at any point. Why would they think to do that after decades of having to deal with it if they're not already notified?
Mhm. So by law, we have to notify victims when there's a transfer from maximum to medium. Normally, we notify victims after the transfer has been completed. In this case, we notified the victim in the morning and then let them know that he was going to transfer to a medium security institution. And then after the transfer, we let them know that he was transferred to La Macasa. And as Kirsten explained, the reason for that is for the safety of the staff that have to escort the inmate. In terms of the security class, so that would be in terms of offenders, inmates that go though to minimum, we have to notify the victims before the transfer. But again, on this question, I would say that the review committee asked that I establish a working group, and that's what we're going to do. And we are going to consult with victims so that moving forward, is there more information that we could provide to victims, including what I mentioned, more general information? Can we provide more information in the correctional plan progress update that we share with them? So this is something that we will be looking at.
Madame la commissaire, Madame les commissaires adjointes, merci beaucoup de votre grande patience et d'avoir répondu à toutes les questions. That puts an end to this press conference.
Et merci beaucoup. Thank you. Including what I mentioned, more general information. Can we provide more information in the correctional plan progress update